So, what would you say in your experience personally and having written a book about this topic? What are maybe the top three things that people do wrong when they're trying to co-parent with a narcissist?
So the number one thing people do wrong when they are trying to co-parent is getting their, I don't know, ex-partner or whatever. It doesn't even matter who it is. But again, when we're talking about co-parenting, right? Getting them to see that they are right, getting them to understand or see their viewpoint. And with someone who is healthy, we have the normal boundaries to, let's say, have input and have active listening, and we are processing what someone else is saying. We have empathy for the other person's feelings. So oftentimes narcissists don't really have empathy, and their whole mindset is about themselves. And so anytime you're trying to get a narcissist to see your point of view, you are running a huge risk of them being told that they're wrong. So that's kind of bleeds into the second thing is telling them that they're wrong, telling them that they are expletive, calling them names, saying and accusing them of doing anything wrong, especially if it's accusing them of being a bad parent. And that would probably beget the question that I'm hearing your viewers already saying to me, well, then what the hell else am I supposed to do? How else do I tell him? Well, again, that's the nature of my book. So what happens when, the origin of narcissism is something in their childhood led them to have a survival emotion of believing that they are right and believing that they have to create a false sense of self in order to survive that family system. And they were likely rewarded or praised for it, or they just got safety out of it. And if that does not get fixed early on, it can turn into a personality disorder. And the problem with narcissism, and the reason why it's so hard to treat, is because you have someone who does not think that they need to be treated. Mm-hmm. So then they create this whole victim mentality that everything's being done to them and that they're the nicest people in the world. And then they're the victim martyr and they've done everything. And so if you've got someone who's dealing with their false sense of self, and that is how they literally survive in their own reality, having someone telling them that they're wrong or getting them to believe another person's point of view goes exactly against the very reality that they're trying to keep. So then your boundary, or any boundary, is then perceived as a threat. And then that threat gets transferred into what's called a narcissistic injury. And then that injury then creates a behavior, right? An emotion that they can't even understand, because narcissists are really probably one of the most unemotionally intelligent people, because any emotion to them is scary. Mm-hmm. So they'll use a false sense of emotion. So that's why this whole concept of love bombing, that's why it's so confusing, because you feel as though it's an emotion, like, oh my God, they're just giving you so much love. But that's not authentic emotion. And it's done out of manipulation, even if it's subconscious. So anything of kind of just going against their grain and who they are, they'll experience a narcissistic injury, and then is often leads to narcissistic rage. So if you're, again, with co-parenting, there's often a lot of text communication or email communication. So your phone will blow up, and it becomes kind of digital warfare. And it's for so many people who come to see me, it just absolutely, it could be quite devastating and really break someone down, especially if they were already kind of still raw from the abuse when they were in the relationship. And I'd say the third thing is, I mean, so there's this whole concept of no contact, right? And that, and there's this term called gray rocking when you're dealing with a narcissist. But no contact is often something that people are trying to do. But when you are co-parenting with one, or if you are in a relationship, whether it's work or your parents or siblings, parents and siblings are a little bit easier. But when you've got your children involved, no contact is absolutely not an option, unless you have a court order that grants you no contact. So that's the third thing of no contact, and you really can't ignore them. So oftentimes, I mean, there's a time and a place for ignoring them, and there's a time and a place for not responding. But unfortunately, if you do that, it's only going to, you know, bite you in the end, because it's doing the exact same thing. It's creating, narcissists, what's the one thing they want so badly? And that's to be heard, right? So you have to manipulate the manipulator, and it's not going out. And everyone asks me, so I have to become the narcissist or I have to become the liar? No, absolutely you don't. But you can use your intelligence and your knowledge of this person to perceive and give this perception that the narcissist is, quote, being heard, without losing yourself in the process.
Right. You're being aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it, obviously for the purposes of co-parenting in the healthiest way possible. Right. What is gray rocking? You mentioned that a minute ago.
Gray rocking, I got to look up where that term comes from, but it's basically just, it's almost like a form of no contact, but it is almost becoming kind of camouflage that you're not being seen, right? So you're ignoring and almost becoming neutralized and neutral. And so it's not really responding to them. And it does work, I'd say if you take that method along with maybe mine and add to it, then it can work in your favor. But oftentimes that's kind of what the only strategy people have. And I think it ends up becoming, it creates more of an issue than it does help in the long run.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate that. I hadn't heard that one before. So when we're talking about, right, your magic formula, right, as it relates to helping people co-parent with a narcissist, what does MAGIC stand for?
Yeah. So MAGIC is an acronym of all of the steps that you can take in order to get to kind of the winning formula. And it really is a formula, and it's a formula that's going to be unique to you, your situation, your kids, your entire family unit. So it is, I always like to preface that it's not prescriptive by any means. You're not doing A plus B plus C equals D, but I give you all of these components, and then it's kind of like the ingredients of a recipe, and then you get to add or remove whatever works or doesn't work for you. So where I came from prior to coaching is I always worked in some kind of advertising or PR agency, or I was always in the agency, marketing, advertising field. And in order to, our job is to get someone to buy something, right? On behalf of our clients, or we're selling our own work to get new clients. And particularly when we're going after a client that we're not very, a particular customer that we're not very aware of, we have to do a lot of research on the buyer. So we create what's called a buyer persona. So I basically took that strategy and implemented it in this way. So that's the first word for the first letter is M, is mapping their persona. Now, the good news, if you have been married to this narcissist or you're related to them, you don't need any research at all, because it's all in your head and you already know this information. So I give you a list of kind of an exercise of how to map someone's persona. And in order to do that, it's really understanding their family of origin, their relationships. How did they grow up? What's going on? What happened with mom and dad and their siblings, and where were they in, where were they ranked? And basically the goal is to try to sieve a narrative on how this narcissist started to create this adapted false sense of self. So that's the first step. Doing a buyer's persona of somebody else is the same thing. It's understanding your customer's behavior. So in the book, I talk about selling peanut butter. So if you're trying to sell your brand of peanut butter, you have to know everything there needs to know about this person who's going to buy peanut butter. And so in that example, I say, busy moms making peanut butter and jelly for their kids, they have to understand everything that worries a mom so much about fixing their kids' lunch. And of course, they have guilt over giving their kid peanut butter and jelly for lunch. And then, of course, what's the famous brand? Choosy moms choose Jif. That's the tagline. They got that out of doing a buyer's persona, hands down, no doubt about it. They did their research, and it's the same kind of research you're going to do.
Interesting. I love that your background shines through in this, right, really unique topic. I think that's so creative how you've, put that together. So, okay. So mapping their persona, what's the A?
A is assessing their fears and insecurities. So now you've got their persona, you understand their family of origin, and then now we're moving into what are they afraid of? What makes them tick? And again, that all comes from their background. And interesting enough, I sometimes suggest is once you've done this exercise, do the same questions on yourself. Mm-hmm. This is the most eye-opening exercise that people do, because you will see that your persona and your fears and insecurities are almost identical to theirs. That's what made you click in the beginning. That's what made everything feel so amazing. So this is why you guys are oil and water, because while you're triggering him, he's triggering you at the exact same time, right? So assessing their fears and insecurities, this is a really important exercise, because let's just say one of their fears and insecurities based on how they grew up is money. And a lot of narcissists a lot of people deal with is they love to spend, they spend more than they have, or they have a ton of money, but they don't want to give any of it to you, kind of thing. So money, and every time you're talking about money, is going to trigger them. So now that the goal is to basically pick your top 5 fears and insecurities, and then that will inform the next steps.